I started recording. Okay, so here we go. I want to pay off a loan. That's an example of a while. I have it just another timer posted. Shut up. Okay, so start again. Class started. I am taking questions. Are there any questions? No, okay. I intimidated everybody. Good. All right. So let's go over a problem like yesterday's lab. Of summing some numbers. Some people didn't sort of see how to like break it down and get an answer. And then I want to go over a loop program as well. All right. So. Twice. Okay, so a new program. It's going to be how to add some math series like yesterday's lab, but a different series. Start a page. Okay. All right, so we're going to look at you have to do this second series for lab. So we will look at maybe this one or both to sort of circle around what you have to do and lead you to what you need. So let's have the user enter a number n so that you know what to take your series up to. So I will request the user to enter the limit n. Have an input for that. It will be of the number type. Needs an ID. Call it limit. I'll give it a value to start with of, let's say, 100. Let me give my label a 4. Okay, so I have, and then I need a break. So I've prompted the user for the limit. I've had them enter the limit, and I will update the limit. Do I want a button or do I want to update the limit as they change the number? Update as they change the number. Okay. So I need a place to display the answer. Do we want to see all of these? Do I want to see all the values in some big text area or just like the final answer? Final answer, okay. So I'll make some div just for the final answer. I'll give it an ID. I'll call it div answer. Let me put some dash in there to begin. And I'll dispatch some event. So we'll get it working and then we'll dispatch some event to get it a better starting place. Okay, so on the change, on the input, I should say, on the input, we're going to call a function. And what do you want to call it? Calc, series, math, what do you want to call it? All right, so we have, let me save and just view it quickly. So far, I have a label, an input of the number type, and a div for the answer. And what am I going to do? I need a function. So I need a script. I need a function. And what am I going to do? I want to add up the numbers up to some n. So these go to infinity, but we're going to go up to some finite number. And I'm not going to do this one, because that's the one you have to do, but I'll do either this one or both. Which one do you want first, or which one do you want if I only do one? The second, the logarithm one?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're trying to do this down here. Okay. So let's get an idea. Maybe I'll put it in. I just want to have, I'll use Excel to help build up this idea. But the first thing we need to do is get the number of times they want to be in this loop. We know how to do that. That is let, I'll call it limit, equal, document, go to the page, get the element by ID. I called it txt limit. It has a value. Okay. So we got the limit, and it is, we are going to do some sum up to this number of limits. So we want a for loop. And I usually count with the variable I. I'll start off with 1. Sometimes we start off with 0. Sometimes we start off with 1. I'll start off with 1. See if that works for us. Less than or equal to the limit. And we're going up by 1s. Okay. So we're going up. So this down here says I, so that means it's 1, then 2, then 3. If we were doing this one, you can either get the denominator by saying 2 times I minus 1, or you can go up by 2s. But normally, our normal thing is to go up by 1s. Okay. So let me take my limit down to 10, because 100 is too many. And let's do, I haven't done a console log in a while. So let's put it into the console. And so we're just going to slap out the numbers from 1 to whatever they say. By default, it will be 10. And let me open the console, right click, inspect. Console, and it's on the change on input. So I'm going to change the number, and then I have an error. It doesn't like value of line 17. So I misspelled my ID. Let's look at that error message again, because that's a common error message. When it says can't read properties of null, that means it didn't understand your element. And that usually means an ID is wrong. So it told me it was line 17. I looked to line 17. I was indeed getting an element on that page, but I wasn't getting I thought I was getting an element on that page, but I wasn't. And hopefully this fixes it. So change, and now I have over here, we see the numbers from 1 to 11. Okay. So this is the idea. Before I worry about summing up any terms, first I want to get the terms. So what are the terms in this thing? So I need to come back here. The terms are down here. They are changing sign. So I'm taking -1. So I is my counter. I is the normal counter in mathematics. That's why I also tend to make it my normal counter in programming. So we want that I that we have in the denominator, and we want the numerator to be -1 raised to the I plus 1. Okay. So, and forget the, So we can really break it down and we can say 1, 2, 3. That's what we've got here. This is just our counter. This is our I. And then if you really want to break it down, you say, what is my numerator? What's my denominator? What's the whole, put the whole thing together, the fraction, or make the term, which would be the numerator over the denominator. And then finally, we want some summing of them. So the numerator is, what's the first one? I plus 1 is 2, -1 squared is 1. So we start off 1, then -1. So those, if we get that, we have the numerator. Our denominator is just the I again. And then if I bring these together, the numerator over the denominator, I have my terms. And then I have to start adding them. So let's see if we can get 1 minus a half, a third, minus a quarter. That's what we want to see. Over here, I'll keep putting it in the console and then we'll be ready to add it. Okay. So let me turn that into a comment. Let's go after let's break it down. Let's go after the numerator. Numerator is the 1 minus 1, 1 minus 1. It is -1 raised to the I plus 1. And that is, we learned, or I gave a hint yesterday on the lab. If you were working on yesterday's lab yesterday, Math.pow. And that raises, it takes 2 what we call arguments. The first one is the number we raise to a power, and the second one is the power. And so I'm raising -1 to the I plus 1, they said. And so then if I console log that, I should see just 1 minus 1, 1 minus 1. 1 minus 1, 1 minus 1, 1 minus 1. So I have my numerator. My denominator is I. I had a more, I'll break it down. Just to, in principle, We might, in other problems, have a more complicated denominator, but find the numerator of the term, find the denominator of the term. So this should just, again, be the i's in this simple problem. So there are the i's, but those were the numerators for this problem. So I have my numerators, I have my denominators, then I'll say I'm breaking it down. That's what I'm trying to model for you, how to break something down. Then I want the actual full term, which is going to be the numerator divided by the denominator. And we're going to log out that. So what happens if I run that, save it, change this up here? Now I'm getting my 1 minus 1/2, 1/3, minus 1/4, 1/5, minus 1/6, etc. So I have my numerator oscillating between positive and negative. I have my denominators growing as I grows. And for the simple log one, then that is the series, that's everything. So we should just start to sum them. Okay, so that is a common thing to do in a loop, is to add up the terms in a loop. So this should be something that you should be getting used to. We have done it before. We subtracted a lot a week ago in lab. We had some amount of money and we kept subtracting from it. Whenever we have a big long display, we are adding to it. So we've done this type of a thing over and over again. We're going to start a sum. And when you start a sum, always with a loop, you ask what is repeated, what's not repeated. What do I have to do before I start repeating? What do I have to do after I stop repeating? So I want to have a sum, and I start my sum at 0, and I do that before the loop. If I do it in the loop, I'm not going to get anywhere because I'm going to keep setting it to 0 again. Yeah. I'm not going to do it after the loop because that would erase everything. And I can't add in the loop if I don't have my sum. I'm going to display after my loop. So I'm trying to model for you the thought process for doing something like this. When you're doing a loop, what is repeated? Of the stuff that I want to do on my page or behind the scenes of my page, what is repeated? That belongs in the loop. What's my setup? What did I have to do before? What's not repeated, but did I have to do before I started my loop? And then what do I do when I'm done the loop? So there is, in a loop, there is a before, a during, and an after, and the during is the repeated part. So we're starting a sum. I always say we start the sum at 0. That doesn't make sense to you. Imagine we go to the supermarket. You're in charge of adding up the items I put into my basket, and we just walk through the door, and I ask you, what's the sum so far? It's 0. I haven't given you any items to add up, so our total at this stage is 0. But I want to do what? What do I want to do in my loop down here? I want to add the term. I have some sum so far. I want to add the term to it. I want that to be the new sum. So first I want it to be 1. Then I want it to be 1. I want it to be the sum I already have. And then I'm going to add, although it's a negative number, I'm going to add that. So what did I do? I said equals the sum here equals the sum before plus the term. Sum equals sum plus term. So now I'm going to show this console log. And so I'm getting some number. And then, all right. So now what do I want to do? I want to display. I want to display on the page. I asked, did you want to display all the steps as we went along? You said no. You said just display the answer. So that makes the display after the loop. Is display always after the loop? No. If you want to display all the progress as you go through the loop, then the display is in the loop.
Like it sounds
Like
okay. Basically what we did, the console did.
what the console, yeah, if you wanted to see what was in the console, then you would have your display on the page inside the loop. But if you want to only see the final answer, then you put the display outside of the loop. Now, if you want to see, if you want your display to show all the things in the loop, you've got to remember in your display to do a plus equal. If you just do an equal in your display, you're going to overwrite and you're only going to see the last term. So remember to do, if you wanted to see all the terms and you were putting your display in the loop, also remember to make it a sort of a plus equal thing. All right, so we want to display, that is the div. So we're doing something to the page, document, get element by ID. It was div answer. Divs have inner HTML. And what am I going to say? The sum of the first, and how many terms am I going to have? Limit terms, I don't know, of the series is, and that's too long. Let me do it here. I was like a plus at the end because that tells the computer more is coming. So the sum of the first limit, that's how many terms I asked for. Terms of the series is sum. So sometimes I can just display the answer. Sometimes I want words. You have to give me what I want. And so the first 11 terms, and it goes back and forth because the terms are positive and negative and positive and negative. And there we go. So that is the game. Now let's add, if I want those first 10, that first calculation with the 10 to be showing when I start, what do? I have to pretend that the user chose that 10. How do I pretend that the user chose that 10 that's there in the beginning? What's that?
No,
I don't know.
Can we say that the thing is limit equals 10? Right?
We could just figure out what the answer was for 10 and write this stuff in the box. I don't want to do that. I want to unload. It's possible to put something on load. Let's try that. So what do we want to do on load?
Yeah.
Call calc?
Yeah.
Let's try that. That's not what I was thinking of, but that might work. So do we have what we need in calc? I think we do. So if on load calls calc, that should work. There's the answer for 10. Another way to do it, which I've shown you in some examples, is to dispatch an event. You can use the loading of the page as an event that calls the same function. Or you can pretend that the system had an event by dispatching an event. If I had things to do on the page other than this calculation, then I might want to dispatch the event and do my other stuff when the page is loaded. But both approaches work. And I will take things that work. I don't, you don't have to do things. You have to put on the page the things I say, but you don't have to do it the way I say. But on this test coming up, when I tell you to use a loop, that means you can't just, if the loop was 10 times, you can't just write out something 10 times. And you must use some structures. I won't specify that it has to be a for loop. If you want to use a while loop, that would be fine by me. All right, so that should get you through. I'm not going to do that one. That one's for you guys. So the denominators, the numerators got that oscillating sign in it. There's also a 4. And the denominator is a little more complicated. It's not I, but 2i minus 1. It's not that much. They chose a good example with the oscillating thing here. That's sometimes difficult to get. But your denominator is a little more complicated. And your numerator has a factor of 4 that you need. Okay, so questions, that's supposed to help you get through part of yesterday's lab if you haven't.
Can you explain that Math.pow?
Say it again. Math.pow. The math is the built-in library. So math is, I don't know, JavaScript's built-in library. One of them. Pow is a method of that library. It takes 2 arguments. Those are the things in the parentheses. It usually assumes they're floats. So it's assuming that they are like have a decimal part, that they're not pure integer whole numbers. And then what you have to be careful about with POW is raising it to the 0. That could be a little funky, but any other power should be fine. And then the first argument is the base. So I'll call it X. And the second argument is the power. I'll call that Y. And then the result is X raised to the Y.
What is that raised?
Raised to the, 2 raised to 3 is 8. raised to the power. I don't know what symbols you use. So you would, if you were writing it, it would be 2 and the 3 would be smaller but raised up. It would be a superscript. Okay. Yeah. And we were using it for our x was -1 and our power was. So we were just going back. We were just using it to go back and forth between +1 and -1.
Can you explain timer to me?
Timer?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's look at it. I posted a timer example, so let's look at that. So I'll do my horse race. Let's just grab, that's in downloads. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to put it in my 230. And here's my horse race timer folder now. And so we have a bunch of horses and I hit a start button and then the horses start racing across the screen. Okay, I'm already bored. And they are on a timer. So there are 2 kinds of timers. This is a repeating timer. And so blah, 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 page, page, page. Okay, so here's the script. Here's clicking the button. Clicking the button, I have, here is the timer. So if I want to stop a timer, I didn't as a user stop the timer, but as a coder, I stopped the timer when the race was finished. If I want to stop a repeating timer, I need to give it an identity because I can have more than one timer. So if I'm going to stop a timer, I need to be able to identify what timer I'm stopping. So I must grab its ID when I establish it. And I must set the timer globally, because when you declare a function, when you declare a variable inside a function, it's only remembered for the duration of that function. So I can't let timer ID be in the function click, because then I'll forget the ID the second I'm done that function. So I declare it up here, what I usually call globally, but establish it down here. I initialize it down here, and I don't need this window. That's just an old-fashioned thing I was doing because I wrote this program years ago. SetInterval is a repeating timer. So there are timers where I say I'm going to do something in 10 seconds, but I'm only going to do it once. And that is a set time out. So then you say, I'm going to do something. How long from now am I going to do it? A set interval, that is a repeating timer. And that says, I'm going to do something, and then I'm going to do it again, and then I'm going to do it again. So I'm going to keep repeating. So that's why I'm teaching timers with loops, because it's a different kind of repetition. It is the system, the timer, giving us the repetition. Okay. So set interval is this establishing of a repeating timer. I'm remembering the ID that that timer produced, so then I can later stop that timer. There are 2 arguments of set interval. The first one is a function that I'm going to call. And the second one is the time between successive calls. So I'm going to call move horses. I'm going to call move horses again. I'm going to call move horses again. I keep calling this function move horses. I'm going to this. So this is the function I'm going to call. So I'm responsible for defining it. This is how many milliseconds go by before I call it again.
That is every time.
Every 10th of a second, exactly. Now, if you ask the function is trying to do too much, you know, you can't always trust the time. Like if the function you call takes more than a 10th of a second, then it's going to start to lag and fall behind. Okay. But so, you know, you can't completely trust it as like, you know, Swiss timing or anything like that. Okay, but that's what this means. An issue, we said that I needed the ID of the timer because I can have multiple timers. I don't want multiple timers in this problem. I don't want the user to be able to click that button more than once. So I am disabling the button. So this is me, this is the user, clicks the start button. It starts this timer. It's a repeating timer. It's calling, I just screwed things up. It's calling this function move horses every, as you say, 10th of a second, every 100 milliseconds. And I disable the button so that they can't hit it again. Now I start my function for moving the horses. I have 6 horses, so I've set up a loop over from 1 to 6. My horses, you played yesterday with the oscillating spring, to sort of, for you to be able to control where things are on the page, they should have a property known as the position absolute. That allows you to decide where they are on the page, or where they are at least within their container. So I can determine that this horse, so I make my first horse, horse 1, there's its SRC. I gave it a class so I could sort of collectively style my horses. And then I gave it an individual style. I could have probably styled it above, but I gave it a position absolute. That means that when you make a web page in general, that you just place one thing after the other thing horizontally, and some things like a div like to be underlined by themselves, and then you place them one after the other vertically. But if you say position absolute, then you can say, here's the left I want, here's the top I want, here's my absolute position. I gave it, so we made it position absolute. We gave it a left of -100. That is when I start the race, the horses are sort of out of their box. That, and then they had a width of 100. That's just how wide they are. And I didn't supply the top. So vertically, it's just one horse after the other. So I had some breaks.
What is it? Oh,
Alt is something you're supposed to do when you have an image. Like I try to be good about labels. If I have a label and then I have an input, then I like to have the label have a 4 so that it's telling somebody who is visually impaired what the input is about. You're supposed to have an alt for all of your images that describes what the image is for somebody who could not see the image. Either the image didn't download or they have some visual impairment. So you're supposed to have an alt to have a description. So my alts really should be horse 1, horse 2, horse 3. That would be more descriptive. I just put quote, quote, because I'm lazy. But that's what alt is. So these are my horses. Their IDs are horse 1, horse 2, horse 3. I'm going to exploit that as to loop over my horses.
and you stop the timer, but having, let's say, example, some other function that is called stop, and you call it a function when horses reach some length,
Yes,
Then timer stop.
then the timer stops. I didn't, yes, I'm going to get there, but I'm going to first tell you about moving the horses, and then I'll tell you about stopping the horses after I tell you about moving the horses. So I have a variable called left. I'm looping over 1 to 6 because I have 6 horses. I'm going get element by ID horse plus I. So I'm getting the ith horse. When I'm in the loop the first time, I'm getting horse 1. When I'm in the loop the second time, I'm getting horse 2. So this is an image. I'm getting the style of the image. I'm getting the left of the image. So I'm finding out the left position of the horse. I put parse int because that will get rid of the pixels. And when we set the left in the style, it has units of pixels. I want the pixels to go away because I want a number. And parse int will not only say if it were 3.6, it will get rid of the 0.6 and make it 3. That's something parse int does for you. But another thing parse int does for you is if you have a number and then some words, it throws away the words. And I have px and I want that thrown away. So I had some position of the horse, the left position of the horse. I'm doing parse int. I'm throwing away the pixels, and that's my left. And now I'm adding to my left some random number up to 10, 0 to 9. And then I'm going to make that the new position of the horse. So here I was going to the page. My document get element by ID was in line 69. My document get element by ID was on the right. So I'm getting something from the page. In 75, my document get element by ID is on the left. So I'm doing something to the page. So in between, I've updated my left. So now I'm going to the page, horse plus I again, styled again, dot left again. I'm using this variable left, which I've updated by a random number, and putting the unit back in. That advances my horse that random amount. I'm in a loop, so I am advancing my horses. I'm advancing each horse. Okay. If my left, the left of the horse that I've just advanced, if it's greater than width of the track plus a horse, so that means that I'm getting over here, I'm getting over the finish line. Or I'm taking the width of the horse minus this. And you always have to play a little bit with widths of images. So if the horse gets far enough, I'm just saying I have a Boolean variable called game over. That means that somebody won the race. And I'm not saying who won the race, I'm just saying the race is over.
Game over, it's fine.
Yeah, I haven't done that yet. I'm just saying this is the logic of the race being done. It's coming. If game over, there we are. If game over, clear interval timer ID stops the timer. When I set up the timer, set interval, I remember the timer. I made the timer ID global, so then I would remember it. So now I can stop it. So I have some logic for did a horse win the race? And then if my game is over, if some horse has won the race, then I'm going to stop my timer with clear interval. And then I want to see who won. So that's stopping the timer. So my horses stop. So this was a system event. A timer is a system event. So when we say set interval, we are setting up, usually we have click events. You click the button, something happens, or you change a drop-down list. So we have events like change events, we have on input events, we've had click events. When we establish a timer, we're establishing a system event. So the system has a clock, and it is going to establish for us a system-driven event. And now we're telling it to like stop those events. Now, the system still has a clock and the clock still carries on, but it's not going to affect our program anymore. So this is effectively stop the timer. Then it's just the game logic of who won. So I'm going to loop through the 6 horses again. I'm going to say who's got the maximum left and who was the winner. So I'm looping through and I start them off at ridiculous numbers. There's no horse 0 and the maximum left is certainly not 0. So I just started off at some really stupid number, but I'm looping through and then I'm finding the left of each horse. So I find the left of the horse is the way I found the left of the horse before, with the parseint and the style and all that. And then if the left of the current horse is bigger than my max, then I make it the max. And I remember which horse it is.
Timer thing usable and practical in real life.
It depends, like if you want it to be, if you want anything on your page to move, then yes, you use a timer, but you can't, again, if you ask it to do too much, then it will start to lag. So it depends. If you're asking it to do too much, then yes, then it won't keep proper time and you'll need to do something else. You know, and you probably, if you really want a full-on game, then you don't want to do JavaScript. You want a gaming engine. This is for like a fun little web page thing that's not doing too much. So this figures out which horse won, and we alert out who won, and then alert is something that is modal, meaning that everything sort of stops until the user says okay. So this pops up and it tells you which horse won, and we can see which horse sort of won. And then once they click OK, then we don't have any restart the game logic. I'm just doing it automatically. I'm setting game over to false. I'm putting all the horses back to the starting gate. I'm enabling the start button. So sometimes I'll do that with a separate button of do you want another race? But here I just did it as soon as just after the alert. And that ate up all my time. I have like a minute if you had any other questions on this. Payoff alone on Friday, because that's a nice while example. We need another while example or two.
So quick question for the
Do you want me to look at yours?
yeah.
Okay, then let me stop recording. Do that.
From yesterday.
Yeah, you have a week to